Hola Arlen, ¿cómo estás?
Hola, ¿qué tal? ¿Me escuchas?
Sí, ya te escucho muy bien. Ya puedes aperturar tu cámara, entonces si quieres hacemos una prueba. Perfecto.
Listo.
Ok, perfecto. Voy a anclar tu cámara en este caso
Sí, perfecto.
y voy, ok, estoy anclando tu cámara. Dame un segundo. Ok, estoy listo. Listo, Iván está por unirse, así que
Hola a todas. No tengo cámara acá, pero las saludo a todos.
Hola,
Para lo
Isaac.
que necesiten.
Gracias, muy amable, gracias.
solo Isaac, si me ayudas a cerrar tu
Recuerden
micrófono,
que
de
ya la
favor.
gente que esté en la sala ya los está oyendo, ¿eh?
Si nada
Digo,
más
no
me
sé
ayudas
si,
cerrando tu micrófono.
pero ya los oyen, ¿eh?
Sí,
Sí, me ayudaría cerrando tu micrófono, Isaac. Muchas gracias. Damos la más cordial bienvenida a todas las personas que ya se acompañan con nosotros el día de hoy. Te recordamos que esta sesión comienza a las 17 horas, hora México, hora del centro de la ciudad. Así que te invitamos a que vayas por una bebida, prepares algún café, te pongas muy cómodo porque estamos a punto de comenzar. Así que por favor, ponte cómodo, venos compartiendo tu nombre, de que desde dónde te estás conectando, tus expectativas, para que podamos tener presente quienes nos están acompañando y aprovechar estos minutos. Te recuerdo también que estamos realizando algunas breves pruebas para que toda la sesión surja con mucho éxito, no tengamos ninguna complicación. En breve estaremos compartiendo contigo las instrucciones para que puedas disfrutar de esta conferencia 100% en español, así que en unos minutos más estaremos ya activando esta función para ti. Mientras, te invito a que vayas por una bebida y en unos minutos más nos veamos para acá para compartirte las siguientes instrucciones. Gracias y bienvenidos. Listo, Arlen, pues yo te veo y te escucho muy bien aquí. Ya tenemos la liga de live en vivo para levantar las campañas y Ale, mi recomendación es que puedas sacar tus lives unos 5 o 10 minutos antes para que pues no haya mucho tiempo muerto de los ensayos previos. ¿Parece?
perfecto. Em, Tal se va a conectar como al cuarto para las 7, me dijo.
Ok, no te preocupes, está perfecto.
Ok, y bueno, pues apago mi cámara de mientras, ¿no?
Sí, sin ningún problema, Arlen.
Perfecto.
Estamos aquí.
¿Sabes qué es lo que yo no veo? Perdón, la función de la traducción no la veo
Inicia
activada.
cuando la dicen ellos, Arlen. Cuando
Aún
ellos
no,
inicien la traducción, mientras no la tengan activada no la vas a ver.
aún no la podemos activar, Arlen, porque estamos esperando de que Iván pueda integrarse a la sesión. Una vez que
Ah,
Iván se integre, entonces inicio la función y comienzo con las instrucciones. No te preocupes. Ya está por
perfecto.
conectarse.
Gracias.
Gracias a ti. Hasta luego. Hola, G.
Hola, ¿me escuchas?
Sí, ya te escuchamos. Gen, lo único que ahorita vamos a hacer pruebas de escucharte y verte bien. Ahora que ingrese el traductor, te voy a dar algunas indicaciones para que te conectes. Recuerda tu canal en el que debes estar para que todo salga correctamente. Es el canal de inglés. Lo vas a encontrar abajo. Va a haber un icono como de un globo terráqueo y ahí vas a poder elegir español, inglés. Y tú tendrías que estar en el canal de inglés para que podamos escucharte.
¿En qué momento tendría que hacer eso?
En unos minutos más, solo que se conecte el traductor, entonces ya habilito la traducción y lo hacemos.
¿En qué parte encuentro el globo terráqueo? Bueno, me va a
Abajo,
aparecer.
abajo, al lado de compartir pantalla. Aún no te va a aparecer, G.
Ok, bueno, listo.
Uh-huh.
Bueno, estoy al pendiente, Lau.
Listo, gracias, G.
Sí.
Hola, Genaro, aquí estoy, ¿eh?
¿Cómo estás, Arlen? Qué gusto, ¿eh?
Igualmente, un gustazo.
Oye, Arlen, una consulta. Es Tal Ben Shahar, ¿verdad? No es Shahar, es Shahar, ¿no?
Sí, Shahar.
¿Shahar o Shahar?
Con SH, Shahar.
Shahar, ok, perfecto.
Sí.
Muy bien. Y Tal es el nombre, Ben es apellido, ¿verdad? Ben Shahar es
Ben
apellido.
Shahar es un apellido compuesto.
Exacto,
Sí.
ok. Perfecto.
Ok, perfecto. Listo. En este momento me ayudarían encendiendo sus cámaras. No veo las cámaras, ya está Iván con nosotros. Así que, bueno, recordarle a todas las personas que ya están conectadas que estamos realizando algunas pruebas previas a esta sesión para asegurar que tú puedas disfrutar de esta sesión sin ningún problema. Vamos a hacer algunas pruebas con los speakers y en unos minutos más estamos por comenzar. Y listo. G, ¿me ayudarías prendiendo nuevamente tu cámara? Hola, hola. Ya, listo. Bueno, ya tenemos las dos cámaras activas. Y Arlen, si te parece bien, Ya está habilitada la función de interpretación de idiomas. Tendríamos que estar seleccionando ambos el canal de inglés, al igual que tal.
Perfecto.
En este momento Iván ya está conectado, él ya está conectado en el canal de español. Y si quieres hacemos una breve prueba, Arlen, una vez que estés conectada, para asegurar que todo esté ok.
Sí, ya estoy aquí. ¿Alguien va a escuchar a Iván? No sé si incluso algún participante nos comente o cómo quieres hacerle, Laura.
Sí, ahora mismo les voy a pedir a todos los participantes que ya se encuentran conectados el día de hoy con nosotros, les pediría su apoyo para que nos confirmen a través del chat. Les voy a pedir que en este momento vayan a su menú en la parte de abajo de Zoom. Les aparecerá un icono en donde aparece una ES o una EN. Esto significa el idioma en el que estamos eligiendo escuchar esta conferencia. Si tú deseas escucharlo en el idioma nativo, quédate en la opción EN, que es inglés, para que la escuches en el idioma original. Si deseas escucharla en el idioma español, puedes elegir la parte de español o ES abreviado, y de esta manera tú estarás disfrutando de esta conferencia a través de la traducción simultánea que tendremos el día de hoy. Entonces, si quieres, si nos ayuden pudiéndonos, vamos a hacer una breve prueba con Arlen. Entonces, si nos ayudan confirmando a través del chat que pueden realizar y escucharnos bien en español, se los agradeceríamos muchísimo. Entonces, Iván, dame un segundo, Arlen, para confirmar que Iván nos esté escuchando.
Sí, gracias.
Hola, Iván. Sí, ya nos escuchas. Perfecto. Ok, bueno, pues si quieren hacemos una prueba, damos una breve bienvenida a Arlen y esperamos a que nos estén escuchando en español los asistentes que ya están con nosotros.
Okay, I want to welcome all of you. It's a pleasure to be here and to have with us Tal Ben Shahar. We hope you enjoy the session.
Perfecto, yo lo escuché muy bien. No sé si alguien nos puede confirmar si ya escuchan en español. Perfecto.
Ale dice que sí se escucha, Hugo también.
Ok, perfecto. Muchas gracias por su colaboración. Todas estas pruebas nos ayudan a que tú puedas disfrutar de esta sesión sin ningún problema. Así que te invitamos a que tengas tu audio disponible en español si es que así deseas disfrutar de esta conferencia, y si no, en inglés si quieres escucharla con el audio original.
Lau, en mi caso ya me aparece el globito de interpretación, le doy inglés, ¿verdad?
Sí, por favor, Gen. Y todo lo que tú vayas compartiendo a todos los asistentes, Iván lo estará replicando, a pesar de que sea en español o en inglés, es indiferente, él va a estar replicándolo y todo el público va a poderlo estar escuchando.
Lau, el slide, bueno, es necesario que cambien los slides a los que te envié, y la barra de Zoom no permite ver como la manita abajo, nada más hay que asegurarse porque se come 1 o 2 centímetros para que se vean las indicaciones completas.
Sí.
Pero yo la subí, a ver, habría que ver que sí se vean con la presentación que te compartí.
Val, ¿me podrías confirmar si ya tienes la presentación?
Laura, Tal está como participante, no sé si lo
Ahora
puedes...
sí, ahora lo voy a subir.
Gracias.
Y listo.
Hi, Tal.
Hi, Arlen. How are you?
Very good, thank you. And you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Perfect. So everybody can hear what we say. We have some people connected already. And do you see below the option to choose English in the...
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what you need to choose.
Okay, I just did.
Perfect. Y Laura, creo que nada más faltaba fijar su imagen, ¿cierto?
Sí, justo ahora voy a fijar su
Okay.
imagen. Y aprovechamos estos minutos para que todos los participantes, por favor, nos ayuden a configurar su audio, puedan disfrutar esta conferencia en español. En la parte de abajo vas a encontrar en el icono una E y una S o una E y una N para que tú puedas definir qué audio es el que quieres disfrutar. N significa inglés y podrás disfrutar el audio original de esta conferencia o bien en español para que escuches y nos acompañes a través de la traducción simultánea que tendremos el día de hoy con la participación de Iván, a quien agradecemos que esté el día de hoy en nuestra sesión. Y bueno, pues te invitamos a que aproveches estos minutos. Estamos a 10 minutos de comenzar para que vayas por una taza de café, te pongas cómodo, te acompañes de alguna bebida para esta sesión, para disfrutarla. Tal ya está con nosotros, te damos la más cordial bienvenida y en unos minutos más estamos comenzando. Le damos la más cordial bienvenida a todas las personas que ya nos acompañan el día de hoy en esta sesión. Te recuerdo que si deseas escuchar esta conferencia en español, elijas en la parte de abajo de tu menú, la parte en donde encuentras un icono que dice ES, para que tú lo elijas y puedas disfrutar de esta conferencia con la traducción simultánea que tenemos el día de hoy. Si no, puedes dejarlo en inglés, el audio original.
Gracias. Hola, Lau, ¿me habilitas cámara?
Hola,
Por
G, tienes
favor.
tu cámara habilitada. Bueno, no te puedo ver, pero tienes el permiso para hacerlo.
Déjame ver.
Ok, ya te podemos ver en este momento. Isaac, un enorme favor, ¿puedes ayudarme en el menú donde aparecen 3 puntos sobre tu video a quitar el video? Gracias. Al resto de los panelistas que nos encontramos conectados, también les pido me apoyen con la misma instrucción. Sobre su fotografía o su video les va a aparecer 3 puntos en el menú. Pueden poner ocultar vista propia, por favor. Y G, ¿me ayudas habilitando tu cámara nuevamente, por favor? Ok, perfecto. Isaac, un enorme favor, ¿puedes ayudarme en ocultar tu cámara, tu video?
Lau, ¿los slides los del inicio los mueven ustedes?
Sí, Val está por proyectar. Val, no sé si me puedes apoyar con...
La cortinilla.
Isaac, no sé si estás por aquí, ¿me ayudarías en dar ocultar a tu video, por favor?
Solo digo, hola Gerardo y apago. Hola Gerardo.
Hola.
Isaac, sí. Gracias. Arlen, no sé si tú ya estás por acá, estamos a 5 minutos de comenzar, si me ayudarías abriendo tu cámara.
Sí, aquí estoy. ¿Quieres que le diga a Tal también?
Listo, si quieres, nada más, Arlen, antes de que Tal se una, compartirte que Genaro va a compartir una breve introducción en unos minutos más, 3 minutos aproximadamente acerca de México Puede. Te cederá la palabra a ti para que puedas presentarte y presentar a Tal.
Pensé que él nos iba a presentar.
Ok. Ok. ¿Quieres que, no sé si G pueda
Yo lo puedo
presentar?
hacer, claro.
Sí.
Yo lo puedo hacer.
Ok. Ok, y entonces te cede la palabra a ti y a Tal, ¿te parece?
Perfecto.
Claro.
Y sí tiene que traducir Iván lo que
Claro.
vaya a decir Genaro, aunque sea en español, ¿verdad? Para que lo escuchen bien quienes tienen el canal en español.
Justamente.
Yo estoy en el canal en inglés, ¿verdad?
Sí.
Sí. Regálame un segundo para poder comenzar a proyectar. Listo. A todas las personas que ya están conectadas el día de hoy, muchas gracias por acompañarnos. Estamos por comenzar esta sesión en un par de minutos. Te invitamos a que estés asegurando que estás en el canal correcto para poder disfrutar de esta charla. Te recordamos, el audio original de esta charla está en inglés, es en inglés, el idioma nativo, y si tú quieres disfrutar de esa charla en español, en la parte de abajo, en tu menú, encontrarás un icono parecido a un globo terráqueo en el cual tú podrás elegir el idioma en el que puedes disfrutarlo. ES, que significa español, y puedes escuchar la traducción simultánea que tenemos el día de hoy. Y si deseas escucharlo en el idioma original de la conferencia, puedes elegir el canal inglés. Balso, ¿me ayudas en confirmar en que estamos, en que tú eres, tú grabas en inglés, yo grabo en español? Perfecto. También Ale graba en español. Isaac, si tú nos ayudarías en grabar en inglés, sería ideal. Muchas gracias. Y G, estamos a las 7 en punto. Entonces, podemos comenzar la señal, el evento. Le pedíamos a ahora sí a Arlen a Tal que ingresara con su cámara, e Iván, a partir de este momento nos ayudes con la traducción. Bienvenidos a todos, estamos iniciando con este evento y esperamos que disfrutes mucho esta conferencia y te dejamos con Genaro Hurtado.
Hola, buenas noches a todos. Tal, welcome to Mexico, welcome to Mexico Puede, and thanks to be part of this program. Bienvenidos a todos, amigos en YouTube, en Zoom. Gracias por esta noche tan especial. Es una noche de agradecer, es una noche especial para agradecer por la salud, por la vida, por la oportunidad de crear, por agradecer por nuestro talento, por la oportunidad de ayudar. Entonces, para dar inicio a esta sesión, voy a hacer una breve introducción de lo que es México Puede, y enseguida voy a dar paso a nuestros speakers invitados, Arlen, Solodkin y Tal Ben, Shahar, quienes ya nos acompañan. Vamos a las siguientes láminas para dar una breve introducción de lo que es México Puede. Te comparto que México Puede es una iniciativa que creamos a partir del 11 de mayo pasado, con el espíritu de impulsar la transformación de los negocios a partir del talento de su gente. Y para ello, el programa México Puede, hemos tenido más de 170 conferencias, prácticamente una o dos conferencias todos los días a partir del 11 de mayo pasado, con resultados extraordinarios. Hemos integrado una comunidad de compañías que miramos esta situación que estamos viviendo con un liderazgo de oportunidad, con un liderazgo, con una visión de transformación, con una visión de evolución. Y de ahí que México Puede, te comparto que es un programa que se hace realidad gracias, vamos a las siguientes, por favor, si me ayudan en mover. Es un programa que lo acompañan, es una iniciativa sin costo, es totalmente online y sin ningún requisito, simplemente su espíritu es ayudar a los demás, el no quedarnos cruzado de brazos y extenderle la mano a los emprendedores, a los dueños de negocio como tú, para ayudarles a transformarse. Esta iniciativa consta de 5 ejes temáticos. Uno de ellos es ayudarles a transformarse, a vender de una forma diferente, a potenciar el talento de sus colaboradores, a transformarse digitalmente, a tomar decisiones prudentes y también el apartado de empleabilidad para ayudarles a encontrar una nueva oportunidad profesional si es que las personas así lo requieren. Vamos a las siguientes, por favor, ágilmente. México Puede, bueno, quiero agradecer en esta noche especial a quienes han confiado en esta iniciativa. Es una iniciativa que, como te mencionaba, no tiene ningún costo y ha venido siendo apoyada por empresas, compartiendo sus capacidades organizacionales, el talento de empresarios, compartiendo consejos a otros dueños de negocios para poder enfrentar esta situación que hemos estado viviendo. Vamos a la siguiente. Quiero hacer una mención especial en la siguiente lámina a las cámaras y asociaciones que acompañan esta iniciativa, el Consejo Mexicano de Negocios, el Centro de Felicidad de México, la Cámara con Canaco Servitur, Coparmex, Canacintra, American Chamber, AMEBEC, AMEDIR, AVE, AMEBEC, Inroads y una serie de compañías líderes como las que aquí se ilustran, que han venido acompañando esta iniciativa y compartiendo el conocimiento y sus capacidades para ayudar a esta transformación y esta evolución de los negocios. También compartirles que México Puede tiene un pilar esencial que tiene que ver con el talento. Creemos que el talento es la llave que nos ayuda a salir adelante para enfrentar estos retos. Y dentro de ese talento hemos tenido un eje de bienestar donde hemos trabajado el tema de meditación, el tema de mindfulness, el tema de bienestar en diferentes aspectos, porque creemos que para que tú puedas transformar tu negocio, antes es necesario que tú en lo personal estés bien. Por eso, este eje de bienestar tan importante dentro de México Puede. Y bueno, pues sabemos que atrás del sueño de cada emprendedor, de cada negocio está el sueño de cada emprendedor, que como tú han visionado un negocio y que estamos como todos batallando, luchando, siendo resilientes para poder enfrentar esta situación y salir adelante. Para concluir, quiero decir que dentro de este agradecimiento, yo quiero mencionar un especial agradecimiento a Arlen Solodkin, a Tal Ben Shahar, por ser parte de esta iniciativa, porque el tener la oportunidad de tener esta charla, pues lo hacemos posible gracias a Arlen Solodkin, al Instituto de Bienestar Integral, y quiero presentar, sin más, a Tal Ben Shahar. Él es cofundador del Happiness Studies Academy, es creador del programa de certificación en estudios sobre la felicidad, es doctorado en comportamiento humano, es autor de bestsellers y pues es un gusto tener a Tal dentro o siendo parte de México Puede. Quiero agradecer también que la traducción el servicio de traducción de este evento, tenemos el idioma inglés y el español, y quien lo quiera disfrutar en español, lo puede hacer gracias al apoyo de nuestro traductor, que nos está apoyando dentro de este evento, que es Iván Bueno, y aquí están sus datos para quien quiera tomarle una foto. Bien, sin más, pues quiero nuevamente agradecer esta noche por todo lo que ha sido México Puede, por todo el impacto que ha tenido la iniciativa en los negocios para salir adelante. Y bueno, yo soy Genaro Hurtado, te invito a registrarte, compartir este programa en México Puede para que pueda llegar a las personas que lo necesitan. Y bueno, les dejo con Arlen Solodkin y Tal Ben Shahar. Tal, welcome to Mexico, welcome to Mexico Puede, and thank you for being part of this program, and thank you very much. Gracias, Arlen, bienvenidos.
Muchísimas gracias, Genaro. Gracias a todo el equipo de Brivé de México Puede, a Valeria, Laura, Alemier, Isaac Axen y Iván Bueno. De verdad, muchas gracias por todo su apoyo. Yo soy Arlen Solodkin, directora del Instituto de Bienestar Integral. He trabajado con Tal por muchos años ya, ofreciendo la certificación para el mundo de habla hispana, y es un honor de verdad para mí estar con ustedes. Thank you, Tal. It's such an honor to spend this hour with you. I'm really looking forward to learning and having a great time along with everyone that's watching us tonight.
Thank you, Arlen, and thank you, Genaro, for the invitation. I'm so looking forward to this.
So, Tal, it's been such a long year. It's been a year filled of unprecedented challenges and disappointments for many people. And most of us have taken new roles in order to satisfy the demands of the present moment. But what often happens is that when we focus too much on the present, we sometimes lose the capacity to think about the future. And with that, we sometimes lose also our sense of hope and faith. So we are about to enter into a new year, and most of us are really looking forward into it, although we know that a lot of what we've been going through is going to carry through the new year as well. So I want to focus tonight on how to bridge together the present and the future in order to ignite hope and motivation while remaining grounded in the present moment. What is your take on this, Tal?
Yeah, Arlene, this is a very difficult question and a very big issue, regardless of the time we're going through as a society. Today, I believe it's even more pressing and important to respond to this question. You see, essentially, there are two approaches, two schools of thought when it comes to happiness. There is the future school and the present school. Now, very broadly speaking, you can say that the West is about the future. Why? Because here we really emphasize goals and objectives and have conquering mountains and getting to a better place in the future, improving, achieving, performing. It's about what we can do, and the secret, so to speak, to happiness, according to this school, is achieve your goals, conquer that mountain, and then you'll be happy. But there's a problem with this approach, because what we see all around us, and sometimes our own experiences, is that when people achieve goals, when they conquer a mountain, when they reach an objective, they're happy, but only for a short while. This is why you see so many successful people not happy. They were happy when they made it, but very quickly they go back and become unhappy again. So there is something missing with the future school, with the Western approach that so many of us have. So on the other hand, we have the present school. People are saying, look, you can't be happy if you just think about the future. If you rely on achieving a goal for your happiness, that's not the secret. That's not the path to happiness. The path to happiness is being in the present. But that's a problem too, because as human beings, we are also future oriented. It's part of our nature to want to improve, to grow, to achieve a certain goal. We are driven by our desire to reach the peak of that mountain. So that's also problematic. That's also ignoring part of our nature. This is more associated with the East. So you have the Western approach and the Eastern approach. And the question is, can you bring the two together? And the answer is yes. It's not trivial. It's not easy to do it. The way we can think about it is have a goal, have a meaningful goal, have a goal that is important to us, something that we care about, that is meaningful, that is purposeful for us. Have that goal. And once we have that goal, we can let go of it and just focus on the moment. And when we have a goal and then we focus on the moment, we are free to enjoy every step of the way. Let me give you a personal example. So my publisher said to me that on April 27, they want my book to be out. And I say, April 27 sounds great, which means I have a goal. The goal is that on April 27, I will go to the bookstore and see my book on the shelf. That's a goal that's meaningful to me. That's a goal that's important to me. That's a goal that I care about. It's a mountain peak that I want to reach. Now that I have this goal, I can let go of it. And every morning when I wake up, I sit down and I write for 3 to 4 hours. Now, when I write, I'm 100% in the present moment. I don't think about, wow, April 27th. Okay, I have to get to the top of this mountain. No, I let go of it. It's there. It's helping me, but I don't need to concentrate on it and focus on it. I can focus on the here and now. I can be present. And this is how I'm combining future orientation with present orientation. The future is there. It's meaningful. It's important. And it liberates me. It frees me to enjoy every step of the way, or at least most steps of the way. So having a future goal is important. You know, it reminds me of Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, who said, when you have a what for, when you have a why, every how becomes possible. That future matters. It's important, especially in difficult times. And yet, if we only think about the future, if we live in the future, we certainly cannot be happy.
So how specific do you need to be about that future that you're envisioning? Because many of us really have just a very broad vision of the future. And then it is hard to let go of that vision because you don't know which steps to take. So how would you recommend, or what would you suggest for us to build an image of the future that is achievable and that we really know how to kind of get rid of in order to enjoy the moment?
Yeah. You know, so the first thing, even before I go into how, it's important to understand that if we don't achieve that future goal, that in and of itself doesn't matter that much for our happiness. In other words, the goal of having a goal in the context of happiness is to liberate us to enjoy the present. If I reach it or don't reach it, actually doesn't matter that much. The key is having the goal, not achieving the goal. You know, this is important in the context of children. We often think, well, we don't want them to have lofty goals because what if they fail and they don't make it? So what? So they experience failure and they're disappointed, and then they get up and they try again. The purpose of goals when it comes to happiness is not their achievement. It's not reaching them. It's having them that is important. So the minute we know that it's not that important to achieve them, that what is more important is having them, we stop worrying as much about the goal being precise and the goal being achievable, or the goal being just difficult enough but not too difficult. Having the goal is enough. How do we have it? How do we experience it? We find, first of all, something that matters to us, that is important to us, that we care about, because these are the goals that carry us in the best way. So if I just say, okay, I want a goal to have a bigger house. Why? Because everyone else has a big house. That's not that meaningful, maybe to me. Maybe to someone else it is. So we need to find a goal that is personally meaningful to us, that is personally important. Psychologists talk about self-concordant goals. What that means is goals that are aligned with our values, with the things that matter to us. Now, how do we find that goal? You know, one of the exercises that I do regularly and that I often introduce to my students is the following. I say, imagine that a spell, you know, like a witch came and put a spell on you and said, from now on and for the rest of your life, no one will know what you do. No one will know the amazing things that you achieve. No one will know how rich you are. No one will know how successful you are. No one will know how good you are, how helpful you are. how wonderful you're. No one but you alone will know about the things that you do. In other words, you become anonymous. In such a world of anonymity, what would you do? Now, this is just a thought experiment. It's imagination, because we don't live in such a world, but it's a thought experiment that can really help. Why? Because it can help us see, answering this question can help us see, what is it that I personally and deeply really care about? Now, it may be I would do the exact same things that I'm doing now. It may be that it would be something different, and I may not want to pursue that different path, but it's just a helpful exercise to raise levels of awareness and identify what it is that I'm passionate about, and then have a goal and then just pursue it.
So it is important to know thyself, as some philosophers like, to really understand what moves you, what really is it calls you, you know, and inspires you. And I think that sometimes I have the question, when we're dealing with difficult moments, how do you reconcile this idea of dealing with difficulties in the present moment and also building that positive view of the future, even if it's just slightly more positive or hopeful?
Yeah, you know, the first thing that we need to do when we go through difficult times is really to embrace the fact that it's difficult. You know, it's one of the things that I see, it certainly among many of my colleagues, my psychology colleagues, or people who study positive psychology or the science of happiness, is that very often they would say to themselves something like, you know, I should be able to deal better with this situation. You know, I should be happier now, or I should not be struggling as much. And as soon as we say that, as soon as we think that, immediately we struggle even more.
Mm-hmm.
So really the first step is accepting the fact that it's difficult. You know, one of the most important things for me to do during this period is to communicate to my children that it is okay not to be okay. To tell them, you know, daddy's also struggling at times. It's also frustrating at times. It's also difficult at times. Why? Because when I communicate this to them, what I'm saying to them is that it's okay for you not to be okay, that it's okay for you to struggle. Because as soon as someone feels, well, I should be happier, or there is something wrong with me feeling down, then we immediately increase our levels of anxiety, frustration, and hardship. You know, Arlen, it reminds me, so a few years ago, I was running a year-long program that you were intimately involved with as well, where what we used to have is a week of meetings, and then we had a year-long online program, and then another week of meeting. It was the certificate in positive psychology. And you know, I still remember during one of those second meetings, so after working with students for a whole year, I remember a student during the question and answer put her hand up, and she was a very accomplished psychologist. She was a very successful therapist who was by now very knowledgeable about positive psychology, the science of happiness. And she put her hand up, and she shared in front of the audience, and there were 200 people in this big room. And she said, you know, sometimes, Tal, I feel like I'm a fraud. Sometimes I feel like I'm a fake. And I said to her, why is that? And she said, because, you know, I teach positive psychology. I treat my clients. I help them. But sometimes I go into these dark places. And then she began to cry. And I said to her, do you mind if I ask a question to the rest of the audience? And she said, sure. And I said to the rest of the audience, again, there are 200 plus people in the audience. I say to them, I'd like you to put your hand up if over the last 3 months, you were in one of those dark places. If you experienced that real deep hardship and difficulty. And then I said to her, she was sitting in the second row, and I said to her, just look around you. And she looked around her and 200 hands were up. And then I said to her, look, we all experience it. My hand is up too. We all go into these dark places. And then I looked at her and I suddenly realized something. And I looked at her and I said to her, you don't believe me, do you? You don't believe me that I also go into these dark places? And she said, no, I don't. And that was a very important moment for me as a teacher, because I realized that so many of the students, so many of the experts in positive psychology, in the science of happiness, say to themselves, okay, now I'm experiencing difficulties and hardship, but when I become an expert, maybe like my teacher or like someone else, then I won't have to go through these hard times. That's what the deep belief is. And it's a harmful belief. It's hurting her. It's hurting millions and billions of people around the world who think that somewhere in the future lies a place where there is no anxiety, when there is no sadness, when there is no frustration, where there is a perfect relationship with my partner, where there is constant joy. I don't think that place exists. What does exist? A place where we are happier and calmer, but not perfectly happy and not perfectly calm. A place where there are still ups and downs. Only we have better tools to dealing with the hardships and difficulties. And this is what the science of happiness is about. It's about helping us get a stronger immune system, a stronger psychological immune system. A strong immune system doesn't mean we don't get sick. It simply means we get sick less often. And when we do get sick, we recover more promptly. And one of the ways to strengthen this immune system is to have a meaningful future goal and to also know how to be in the present, in the now, as we pursue this goal.
So I think what you're just saying is so important, and many of the people who are watching are business leaders, and they are also leaders in their families. And you know, when you think about the future and about the present and the East and the West, I think of the importance, for example, of mindfulness and compassion, which are tools that are very often taught in the East. You know, they teach it more maybe than we do, and hopefully they apply it more as well. But as I was preparing also for tonight, I was thinking, you know, compassion and mindfulness are tools that really focus more on the present, and hope is something that helps the present, but it really drives us into the future. So I often like to think about human beings as if we are time travelers, because we oftentimes go, you know, to our past, where we often experience either painful emotions or maybe we have really nice memories, and we come into the present, but we also travel into the future where oftentimes anxiety arises. So how could we best use this capacity? Because it's a wonderful gift that we humans have. How would you say would be the best way to use this capacity of traveling in time.
Yeah, Arlene, this is such an important distinction. And I think the two words that you used, compassion and mindfulness, are extremely important to keep in mind and to keep in heart as we lead in these difficult times. So let me share two superpowers that we can endow leaders and managers in particular. And by the way, when I say leaders, yes, I'm talking about the business world. However, also as parents, we're leaders. As members of the community, we're potentially leaders. So I'm going to talk about business in particular, but this applies very much so to the classroom, and it applies to the family. So the first superpower for leaders is, of course, something that is often talked about, and that is creating a vision, creating a long-term goal and an objective, which is inspiring for people in the organization. And by the way, that's always important. It's important in good times. This is how we lead, through a vision. People are essentially volunteering their time. Yes, we're paying them, but if they're good employees, it means that they can probably go elsewhere. So we need a compelling vision, something that provides them with a sense of meaning and purpose in what they do. And that's, again, always important. So that's about the future. When I'm able, as a manager, as a leader, to ignite the imagination of my employee, then I'm giving them a how, I'm giving them a what for, a why, a reason that they're working. Remember, when you have a why, every how becomes possible. So this is the first one. This is about the future. Now let's look at the present. What can leaders do now? Once there is a vision, remember, a vision liberates us. It's important. What do leaders do? So back in the 1970s, Robert Greenleaf, who was an organizational psychologist, was looking for the characteristic of extraordinary leaders. Extraordinary leaders is exactly what we need for extraordinary times, such as today. So he was looking back in the 1970s for the characteristic that defines extraordinary leaders. And looking at history, and looking at modern day, and looking in politics, and looking in religion, and looking in business, he identified the characteristic of servant leadership. The leader as servant, as the most important characteristic for extraordinary leaders. For example, he said, go back all the way to the Bible. Look at Moses. When did God choose Moses? Well, God chose Moses when he saw him run after a lamb and bring him back to the flock. When he saw that Moses was serving the livestock. And then he said, he can also serve my people. And that's when he chose him in the Bible. Fast forward to the Christian Bible, Jesus. Jesus came to earth. Why? To serve the people. Fast forward to 20th century. What did Mahatma Gandhi do in India? He served the people of India. Look at Nelson Mandela as an example. So Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in Robben Island, in prison, much of it in solitary confinement. He had a lot of time to think during those years. He had a lot of time to think what he would say to people if he ever got released. And he got released after 27 years. And all the cameras were on him from all over the world. What do you think he said to the people, primarily to the people of South Africa? He looked into the camera and said, I am your servant. Because he understood what great leaders, extraordinary leaders, need to do in extraordinary times, such as what South Africa was going through then, transitioning out of apartheid. You look at business leaders, Anita Roddick, from the founder of The Body Shop, and you read her book, it's all about service. Service to her employees. She's the CEO. She's serving her customers. She's serving Mother Earth. What servant leaders do is they take the organizational chart where you have the CEO or president at the top, and then senior management, and then middle management, and then employees, and the organizational chart looks like this. They take this chart and they flip it upside down, where the leader is at the bottom, serving other leaders who serve other leaders who serve others. The leader as servant. And there's been a lot of research over the past 50 years showing just how important it is always, and certainly in extraordinary times. Now, the most interesting thing, and that is related, Arlen, to what you were saying about compassion and mindfulness. The most interesting thing is that they identified the number one characteristic, the number one trait of servant leaders. What is it? Their ability to listen. Their ability to listen to their employees, and also to listen to themselves, to listen to their employees and to listen to themselves. Now, what does listening take? Genuine listening. First of all, it takes compassion to really listen and be there for someone else. And the second thing, you need to be present. Because when you listen and you're thinking about what you're going to say later, you're thinking about the future, you're not really listening. Mm-hmm. Or when you're with the other person but thinking about what happened earlier, you're not really listening. You have to be present and you have to be compassionate in order to be a genuine listener. Now, I also said that you need to listen to yourself, and that is no less important. You know, when the Dalai Lama came to the West for the first time, he was really taken aback by how many Westerners don't actually like themselves. That we in the West have a problem, an issue with self-esteem. And he said, how could it be? You know, he said in Tibet, we don't encounter that. People like themselves. You know, they're not arrogant, they're not narcissistic, but they like themselves. And he couldn't figure it out. And he finally did. And he said, you know, it's because of the language. He said, you know, when you in the West talk about compassion, what we talk about naturally is compassion for other people. He said, when we talk about compassion in the East, he says compassion, the word compassion in Tibetan is tsewe. He said, when we talk about tsewe, we mean compassion for self and through that, compassion for others. Self and others. And he says, because we can be compassionate towards the self, we can also be compassionate towards others. So when we listen, we need to listen to ourselves too, to our needs, to our wants, to be mindful, present with who we are, and to listen to others and be the servant leaders that we need to be today.
Yeah, so it really reminds me of the importance of really, listening to ourselves has become like a second nature. We tend to want to find responses or answers in whatever other people say, and we forget to listen to ourselves very often. It has become like the norm. And oftentimes our perceptions are not as correct as we think. And it's important, therefore, to be able to create these moments where we are able to tap into our inner knowing and to really be truth and honest and cultivate that honesty, which is also one of the qualities of servant leadership. But if we are filled with noise and we are not able to even listen to to our own longings and our own thoughts, then it's very difficult to be honest with the world and, of course, with our own selves. So, yeah, so I just think what you're saying, it's really important and very interesting.
You know, Arlene, when I graduated from business school, and I went on to be a consultant. Initially, I asked for advice from my mentor, Richard Hackman, who passed away 4 years ago, and he was really considered one of the great thinkers in the area of organizational behavior and management. And I asked him for advice, and he said, to me, the most important advice for a consultant or for a manager is to think of him or herself as a researcher, as an experimenter. And, you know, going back to Gandhi's autobiography is subtitled, "My Experiments with Truth." So he saw himself as a researcher, as an experimenter. And when we talk about research, we're actually talking about two related approaches. One is, you know, traditional research that we do when we do market research, or when we look at, you know, psychological research, which is, you know, what I often do, what we do. That's one approach. The other approach, no less important, is me search. Me search is looking inside and asking questions. And it's important as an experimenter, as a researcher, to look both outside and inside. And then to compare, what do I see? And then to ultimately decide which path I want to take. But this exploration, this experimentation, looking outside and looking inside, is so important for managers and for leaders. And then Richard Hackman, my teacher, added, and in order to do that, I recommend that you keep a journal. You know that I always walk around with, you know, my notebook, and I always transfer what I have on my notebook into my computer, into files. I write a journal, whether it's about ideas that I have or that my clients have, or research ideas or me search ideas. I write about feelings, emotions. It's such a powerful tool, having a journal. And it's a powerful tool also because it's a place where I can express my emotions, my difficulties, my hardships, where I can figure out things. You know, we are going through difficult times now, and there's a lot of research, fortunately, in psychology and sociology on dealing with difficult times. And specifically, I want to refer to the research of Arlen and Tonofsky. So Arlen and Tonofsky was a professor at Yale. And he noticed that different people were going through the same experiences. And yet some people were growing stronger and other people were breaking down. And he wanted to understand what is the difference between the group that grows stronger, that is resilient, as a result of difficulties and hardship. How are they different from the group that breaks down? And he identified 3 elements that distinguished them. The group that goes through difficulties and hardship and grows, and again, this applies to leaders in organizations. It applies to parents. It also applies to children from a certain age. 3 different elements. The first element is a sense of understanding. You know, they may be lost, the world may be in chaos, but overall, they're able to make sense of what is happening. Sense of understanding, comprehensibility, he called it. Second, a sense of manageability, meaning it's hard, it's difficult, but we'll manage. We'll find a way somehow to overcome this manageability. And third, a sense of meaningfulness, that there is some meaning even in the hardship. So these 3 elements, comprehensibility or understanding, manageability, the ability to deal with it, and meaning. These three elements, how do we attain them? The best way that we know of today is by writing, by keeping a journal, by exploring through me search. Because when we write, we very often understand better. We very often suddenly see that how we can manage and deal with it. And third, we realize that, hey, there is meaning in the hardship, in what I'm doing right now as a manager, as a leader, as a parent.
Yeah, so really understanding the full human condition is also something that allows us to really be active in the pursuit of what we, of what we want to live. And I'm not sure that I'm being clear, but what you were talking about, Antonovsky, reminded me also of a study where they were saying, they were asking students if they could become great scientists. And you know the study. So the idea is that a lot of the students did not relate to science or math because they thought you needed to have special qualities. And in reality, what students needed is to understand the full experience and everything that scientists had to go through, their struggles, their personal life situations, in order to identify themselves with the human condition. And therefore, they could be able to, in a way, skip this idea that you have to be special in some way to become a scientist. And I think the same thing happens when people, for example, think that only special people can change the world around them.
Yes.
Or you require specific characteristics. And it is really this capacity of understanding that you can manage what you're confronting or living, and you have a bigger understanding of your whole being and the situation around you as well. And and I wanted to kind of draw a line with the idea of becoming agents of change or active agents of change in your own life, because that's what ignites also hope, and that's what is a characteristic also of leadership, that you are able to really understand that you can make a difference in your own life. And you don't have to have any special qualities. We all have them. And it's just a matter of using them. So how do you relate all of this? And I know writing is a very important tool to kind of digest all of what happens inside. And then how do you translate it into actual, actions that can really make your life better, even in difficult situations?
Yeah, Arlene, I'm very glad you made that connection to looking at other people, because I'm a big fan of biographies or autobiographies, whether it's Mahatma Gandhi's My Experiments with Truth, or whether it's the biography of Steve Jobs, or of Anita Roddick from The Body Shop, or of Leonardo da Vinci, which is a wonderful biography by Isaacson. So the reason why I think biographies or autobiographies are so important, I'm talking about good ones, not about ones that just are about writing how wonderful and terrific I am and what an amazing life I had. I'm talking about genuine, real biographies or autobiographies. The reason why they're so important is because what they show us is the real picture, the real deal. And always, with no exception, the real picture and the real deal includes difficulties and hardships and failures and struggles and getting up and success and joy and achievement. It includes it all. And what we're able to see when we read or when we gain a picture of a real life of someone who has been successful, someone who has changed the world, someone who was an active agent rather than a passive victim, what we see is that their lives looked very much like ours. That just like we're struggling, they struggled too. Just like we sometimes feel like we can't go on because it's so hard. They felt the same way too. And yet they continued. You know, as the saying, which is already become a cliche, goes, what matters most is how many times you get up. Mm-hmm. Because we all fall down. And the question is, do we get up again and again and again? You know, the best relationships are not the relationships that are devoid of conflict. They have conflict. The best relationships are ones where the couples deal with the conflict and learn from it and grow from it. The best businesses, the best managers are not the ones who don't fail. They're the ones who fail, learn from the failure, grow from it. You know, it reminds me of a story that is being told at IBM until today about Thomas Watson, who was the legendary CEO of the company, you know, decades ago. And the story goes as follows. A young manager in the organization made a mistake that cost IBM $1 million. And this was back when $1 million for IBM was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money, but for IBM then it was also a lot. And the young man went to Thomas Watson's office the following day with a letter, and he gives the CEO the letter. And Thomas Watson opens the letter and reads it, and he says to the young man, what is this? And the young man says, well, Mr. Watson, it's my resignation letter. And Mr. Watson says, yeah, I can read, but why are you resigning? And the young man says, well, I made a mistake that cost IBM $1 million, and I don't want you to fire me. I respect you, sir. So I'm resigning. To which Thomas Watson said, fire you? I have just invested $1 million in your education, and I'm going to fire you. Now, whether this story is true or not, whether it's accurate or not, that doesn't matter. The fact that it's being told generation to generation, that's meaningful. Why? Because it communicates the idea that failure is part of success, that is how you learn, that it's okay to try and experiment, that is part of reality. What we see in biographies are failures and experiments and difficulties and hardships and overcoming them. And when we see it, we realize, oh, so it's okay if I go through the same thing. And then it gives me hope. And the difference between sadness and depression is that depression is sadness without hope. So having this hope, seeing the possibilities of overcoming hardships and difficulties, of overcoming this pandemic, or of overcoming a conflict within the relationship, or of overcoming a challenge because my competitor has come out with a new product. These are all challenges. They're part and parcel of every life. Do I see a way out? Am I confident that with hard work, with struggles, we as an organization can get over it? And if so, I'm much more likely to do so and take others with me.
Yeah, Dan Tomasulo, who just wrote a book called Learn Hopefulness, he says, hope is an habit of mind and heart. And I really think it is. And when I think about hope, because if there is one message that I would love the audience to take with them is that even in the midst of despair, optimistic outlooks are possible. And there are lots of things that we have in our hands to do. And, you know, there is this theory called hope theory, where they talk that, you know, they talk about the hope in the sense of what you can do with your actual hands, you know, the action and the activities and the tools that you can take in your own hands to make something happen. So it's not only having an optimistic outlook, but it's also, you know, having way power and also having a willpower, you know, so that we can really become agents of in our own lives, you know. And I would love if you can go into it a little bit more, because that gives me hope. And I think it will to the people that are listening today.
Fantastic. Yeah. So, you know, there are Rick Snyder, who was a positive psychologist, introduced hope theory into the literature. And as you pointed out, Arlen, when we talk about hope, or when Rick Snyder talked about hope, he talked about two elements. One is willpower. What is willpower? Willpower is that, you know, clenching of the fist and saying, yes, I can, or yes, we can. And we're going to conquer this mountain. We're going to overcome this pandemic. We're going to get through it. And that's important. You know, having that clenched fist is important. It's important for a leader to communicate that to employees. But he said that's not enough. He said, in addition to willpower, we also need way power. And way power is about charting a path and saying, and this is how we're going to get there. And if this doesn't work, then we can take another way. And if that doesn't work, then there is another way. You know, it reminds me, I think it was 2 years ago or maybe 3 years ago, I was watching one of the Grand Slams. I think it was Wimbledon. And Serena Williams was playing. And she had just come off a match where she won after being down one set and either a break or a double break down. So she was about to lose, and yet she won. And she's often done it throughout her career. And I remember that interview after the game with her, and, you know, she was exhausted. It was a very long game. And the interviewer asked her, so Serena, how do you do it? Because this wasn't the first time. How do you do it? You know, coming back from the brink of defeat. And she said, you know, when I go on court, when I play, I always have a plan A of how I'm going to play my the other player. I always know how I'm going to play my opponent. I have a plan A. But if it doesn't work, I also have a plan B. And then if plan B doesn't work, I always have a plan C. And if plan C doesn't work, I know how to change it so that I have plan D. And she said, you understand, right? So she has contingency plans. She has way power. Yeah, you know, Serena is very competitive and she has willpower and she has way power. This is what I'm going to do. And if this doesn't work, and if this doesn't work, and if this doesn't work. You know, when President Obama ran for office, he had the slogan, yes, we can. Mm-hmm. So the slogan of hope theory is similar. It sounds like this. It's, yes, we can. And if this doesn't work, then we'll try another way. And if this doesn't work, we'll try another way. Now, I don't think it's a great slogan for presidents to run on, but it's a great slogan for leaders to think about. Yes, we can. And if it doesn't work, then I'll try this. And if that doesn't work, I'll try that. You know, I was talking earlier about writing. And there are more and more organizations who are setting goals today in a different way than the traditional way. So the traditional way is write down your goal and then write, this is your long-term goal. This is what you're going to do 10 years from now. This is your medium-term goal. This is what you're going to do a year from now. And these are your weekly goals or your action items. And as managers, we do that. Well, more and more leaders are writing their goals as stories. And it's been incredibly effective. And when you write a story, yes, there is an outcome, there is an ending, and hopefully a happy ending. This is the yes, we can. This is the willpower. We're going to get to, that mountain or that peak. And then the story also has a storyline with adventures. And adventures means difficulties and struggles and hardship. Otherwise, it's a boring story. So they tell a story of what their year or the next 5 years are going to be like. And more consultants, more and more of my colleagues are working with leaders, helping them write the story, the future story of their organization and how they're going to lead the organization to the next level through adventures and hardships, just like every interesting story has. Yes, we can. And if that doesn't work, this is what we're going to do instead.
Well, thank you, Tal. I think this is a wonderful place to stop and for people taking the idea of writing their own stories with, the challenges that we're facing, with that which calls, which is our inner calling, what gives us meaning, and also with all the faith and dreams that we want to, to see in our lives. So I think this is a wonderful exercise that we all can take home and do. And I think we're gonna go and take some questions from the audience. So I think that will be wonderful. And maybe while we receive some of the questions, okay, so I do have some questions here. So let me begin. One of the questions that is coming from Genaro is, what has been your main personal challenge during this period? Tal.
I think my main challenge is the fact that, well, actually similar to what most people have, the fact that, I hadn't seen my parents or hugged my parents in a year. It's the longest that I've been away from them in 50 years. So, that is challenging. It's challenging for me not to be able to see my friends as often as I can, or as I did before. And, along with that question of these challenges that, again, are challenges we all have, the question is, what do we do with the fact that we can no longer have the same kind of relationships that we had before? Because, if we were talking about relationships a year ago, I would have said to you, meet people, interact with them, go to, have meals together, go play together, be in person with other people. Today, it's not as realistic anymore. Today, the virtual world is taking over relationships, and it's not the same. However, not all is lost. So a year ago, I would have made the distinction between virtual relationships and in-person relationships. And I would have said, go for the in-person relationships. because 1,000 friends on social media, they're no substitute for that one best friend that you see face to face. That's what I would have said a year ago. Today, I would make another distinction, and that is between superficial relationships and deep relationships. We can still have deep relationships, even if they are through the screen, even if they are on the phone, even if they are through letter writing. There are still ways of cultivating deep relationships, and this is what we must do today. And for me, as soon as I said, okay, this is a new reality, I can't see my parents as I did in the same way that I saw them before. I can't see my friends in the same way and in the same frequency as we got together before. But I can still have, you know, a 1 hour or 2 hour conversation through, you know, Zoom or WebEx with my friends. And we can still get together and talk. And I can still write long letters and emails to some friends where we do interact through writing. It's still possible to cultivate depth. And that has helped me a lot. And yet it's still difficult. It's still hard.
Yeah, holding both, right? The possibility and the challenge at the same time.
Yeah.
So we have two questions that are similar to one another. Well, they relate to each other. One is, how can you start building happiness when you're facing many problems, or when the problems that you're facing seem unbearable and huge? And the other one is how to break through to apathy in these moments. And I think they are kind of related.
Yeah. So I mentioned it in passing earlier, but I'll elaborate on it some more. The key when we're facing difficulty, the first step is accepting and embracing the difficulty. You know, there's a beautiful poem by the Sufi poet from the 13th century, Rumi, called The Guest House. And in that poem, Rumi talks about how we need to invite all emotions in, whatever they are, the painful emotions, the pleasurable emotions, the hardships. We just need to invite them in like guests into our home. Because if we don't invite them, they actually grow and intensify and affect us in a negative way. Whereas when we embrace them and accept them, they just flow through us and they go away just as they came. So the first step when going through hardships and difficulties is embracing hardships and difficulties and saying to ourselves something like, it's natural, it's human nature, it's part of who I am, and that's okay. And after we accept and embrace these emotions, then we're in a much better place to choose the action that we want to take. For example, fear or anxiety. If I say to myself, Tal, don't experience fear, don't experience anxiety, what will happen? I will experience even more fear and more anxiety. Whereas if I say to myself, fear is natural, it's part of being human, then that fear will be manageable. It will not grow beyond that, and I can choose the most appropriate course of action. Courage is not about not having fear. Courage is about having fear and going ahead anyway. And it's when I accept and embrace the fear that I'm most likely to act courageously. You know, in Buddhism for a long time, and more recently in research, there is talk about two levels of suffering. The first level of suffering is inevitable. It's the suffering, the pain that every human being goes through. That's level one. Level two suffering comes when we reject the first level. So if I experience this inevitable level and I reject it, it goes up. The first level, I don't have a choice about. The second level, I do have a choice about. And if I accept and embrace painful emotions, invite them in as guests, then I'm less likely to experience the second level of suffering. And then it also becomes more manageable, and I can choose the most appropriate course of action. Once again, this is why I like biographies, because in good biographies, you see the struggles and you see the action that was taken in spite of the struggles or with the struggle, alongside the struggles. So it's what I call active acceptance, accepting the emotion and yet choosing to act. Sometimes choosing to act means faking it, because sometimes we don't want to get up and do something. Sometimes, and during these times more often than usual, we feel apathy. We feel weak. And yet we can still take action. You know, one of the most common phenomenon that we see in the world during regular times, and it's becoming a lot more common today, is procrastination. You know, procrastination is mañana. You know, we postpone it till tomorrow, what we don't have to do today. And during these days, because we feel more apathy and because we feel less energy than usual, we postpone more often, we procrastinate more often. How do we deal with procrastination? It's important to understand the difference between procrastinators and non-procrastinators. Here is the main difference. One of the differences. The main difference is that procrastinators believe that motivation or inspiration comes before action. In other words, I first have to be motivated. I first have to be inspired. And then I will act. Then I will take action. So if I don't feel motivated, if I don't feel inspired, I'll just stay in bed until a time when I do feel inspired and motivated, and then I'll act. That's a very unhelpful model. That's a very unhelpful mental model to have. People who don't procrastinate understand it differently. They say, first action and then motivation and inspiration. Act first and then inspiration and motivation will come. So even if they're feeling down, doesn't matter. They just do it. Even if they have to fake it until they make it. You know, I write every morning. During regular days, let's say up to a year ago, sometimes I would wake up and say, I don't feel like writing. I want to watch a video. I want to just stay in bed. But I didn't fool myself. And I said, action precedes motivation. And I just went to my computer and I started writing. And then after 5 minutes or 10 minutes, I was already in it. Today, it happens more often. It's more challenging for me to write today. But so what? So I'm human. So I'm going through a pandemic just like everyone else. So my parents haven't hugged me for a year and I miss them terribly. That's okay. I can still go to my computer and do this action, even if I have to fake it. And then after 5 minutes, or sometimes after 15 minutes, or sometimes 2 hours, I eventually get into it. And if I don't, so what? I still feel better because I did my work which I'm passionate about, which is meaningful and purposeful to me. And I feel a lot better instead of not doing it and then going downward spiral and feeling worse about myself after. It's okay to fake it until you make it. Action precedes, comes before inspiration.
That's so important, and to cultivate a hopeful cycle as well. So, yeah.
That's exactly what it does.
Yeah. So, Tal, a lot of people are asking also about how can they learn more about these tools, and maybe you would like to share a little bit about the Certificate in Happiness Studies before we leave tonight.
Happy to. Thank you for asking about it. So the Certificate in Happiness Studies is a year-long program that essentially comes to answer two questions. The first question is, how can I become happier? Second question, how can I help others become happier? Others could be my employees, my colleagues, could be my children or family as a whole, could be my community. And asking these two questions, how can I become happier and how can I help others become happier, is important for various reasons. First of all, it's important because we all want to be happy and we all want people, our loved ones, to be happy. But the second reason is because if you increase levels of happiness, even by a little bit, what you immediately find is that productivity goes up, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in school. That creativity, innovation goes up, whether it's in schools, whether it's in the business. You find that engagement improves. You find that teamwork, or more generally relationships, improve. You find that physical health actually improves. Our physical immune system strengthens if we increase levels of happiness, even by a little bit. So happiness is important, whether our own or others, because it feels good to feel good, and also because there are all these side benefits, byproducts, positive ones, of increasing levels of well-being.
Yeah, so the program is also in Spanish, so people can certainly join and have the full experience of it. And well, I don't know if there are some other questions, but I think, I think I would love to really ask you to see if you can offer maybe 3 words of wisdom or a wish for this coming year, and how can we sustain this hopeful vision for the future in these difficult times, so that we close the year filled, with some good energy that can carry us through next year.
I think the most important thing to do right now is to go back to basics. To go back to basics and to implement those basics consistently. And I'll just give a few examples. Basics could be spend time, whether it's virtually or in person, spend time with people we care about and who care about us. That's very basic. That's a basic human need. We need even more of it now as we go through difficult times. A basic human need is to be physically active. So to exercise, even if you're in lockdown, even if you can't go to your favorite gym, you need to exercise, you need to move. Even if it has to be in your room, in your home, to move, to jump, to be physically active. That's basic. Basic is to help other people. Part of our nature is that we feel good about ourselves when we help. We make the world a better place when we help. And when we help, we shift from being helpless to being helpful. And that's an important shift all the time, especially in difficult times. Going back to basics means learning. We were given, whether it by God or evolution, take your pick, we were given a mind where we can think, where we can learn. Use that capacity. There's research showing that people who are curious, who learn, who ask many questions, are not just happier, they also live longer. Mm-hmm. So use this time to learn something that you are interested in, that you are passionate about. And go back to basics in the sense that embrace any and all emotions. If you experience sadness, experience the sadness. If you experience joy, experience joy. And then cultivate a very important human emotion, which is gratitude. Spend 1 minute every night before going to sleep. And think about one thing, two things, if you want to go wild, three things for which you're grateful, that you appreciate. Whether it's your family, whether it's a friend, whether it's your work, whether it's the fact that you have food on the table, whether it's God. Appreciate one, two, or three things and really appreciate them. Experience the gratitude in your heart. And if you do that on a regular basis, consistently, that will actually make a difference, a positive difference in your life. If you help your kids or your employees do the same, it will make a difference in your family, in your organization. And keep in mind that going back to basics also means that small changes consistently applied can and do make a big difference. In other words, there is hope.
Thank you, Tal, so much. So I want to thank the audience very much for participating with us. We are going to start the new certificate program on February 1st. And we have a special offer for those who were part of this webinar. So you can contact us to learn about the special discount for the people who are joining us tonight. And Tal, I just saw a lot of people interested in how they can help their team create these stories and create these goals, you know, in this storyline that you were talking to us about. So is there a resource that you could share for them to look at?
Yes.
Or
there are many resources online. One resource that I would point to is the whole field of appreciative inquiry. Appreciative inquiry was created by David Cooper-Ryder and his colleagues. And what the approach is to appreciate what you've already done, the progress that you have made, and to learn from that and derive stories from a positive past. So essentially, appreciative inquiry is drawing on a positive past to inspire the present, and through that create a better future. And it's a very powerful technique. There is a lot of research behind it showing how much it can help businesses, organizations, and it is relatively straightforward to apply with your teams. So appreciative inquiry is where I would start.
Yeah, there are many books about it in Spanish. It's called Indagación Apreciativa. Sorry. Okay. So, okay, I just wrote it there. So, well, thank you so much, Tal, for your time, for sharing with us your wisdom. It's always a pleasure. Muchas gracias, Genaro Hurtado. De verdad es un gran placer el haber sido nuevamente parte de esta comunidad, y tú eres un gran ejemplo de verdad de ser un líder al servicio. You know, I'm just sharing, Genaro has been really an example of servant leadership, because in the midst of so much despair, where no one knew what to do, he said, let's, you know, get together, let's form this community, and let's share what we know with the rest of the people for free, you know, for them to, and what he's done has been amazing, and a lot of people have joined him. So
amazing.
Thank you, Genaro, very much.
Thank you.
El ejemplo que queremos ver en México y en el mundo, really. So, perdón.
Tal, I just want to thank you. As I said at the beginning, this is a thank you night. And Tal, I want to thank you for being here, to stay with us, and to share your thoughts and your experience. And that comes in the best time, because we are closing a year, and it's like the best time to make a stop and to think about us from inside to outside. And I really appreciate your time, and to Arlen for make this dream to make this this event possible in Mexico Puede. And thank you very much, Shal. Thanks for being here. I saw you some years ago when you come to Mexico to a Gobi event, like 5 or 6 years ago. And I really thank you again, and I wish the best for you and for your family in this end of this year in the Catholic community. Thank you.
Thank you, Genaro. And I really do hope that I'll see you and many others again soon in Mexico. This is, the first year. Well, no, it's not true. I was in Mexico in January, but it's the longest I've been away from Mexico for a very long time, because we visit often, whether it's for work, whether it's for a vacation with my family. It's a favorite place of ours, and I hope to be back really soon in person.
Thank you, Tal, and gracias a todos, gracias Arlen, especialmente agradecer a Iván Bueno, quien ha hecho posible y muy fluida la traducción para tener una versión en español. Gracias a quien se han conectado en YouTube para seguir este evento, y vamos a tener el evento en redes sociales y todo para poder beneficiar a más personas, para quienes están aquí, que lo puedas compartir con tu familia, con tus seres queridos. Cosas tan sencillas y tan poderosas. Yo me quedo con el tema de agradecer a todos en esta noche especial, con los superpoderes que mencionó Tal, crear una visión que inspire a los demás en el por qué, en el para qué, y ser un líder de servicio, ser líderes de servicio en liderarnos a nosotros mismos, ser líderes de servicio en nuestra casa, con nuestra familia, ayudando a los demás y teniendo esa habilidad, como mencionó Tal, de escuchar, de estar con nosotros mismos. Yo mismo me llevo tarea de esta sesión, el reto de estar quieto, de estar escuchándome a mí mismo. Y bueno, pues desearles a todos quienes nos acompañan, enviarles un abrazo, de verdad, decirles que México Puede, se ha integrado una comunidad increíble de líderes, de negocios, de personas, que vemos esta situación como una evolución personal, una evolución para transformar nuestros negocios. De todo corazón agradecerles a quienes hacen posible este evento, Arlen, y pues invitarlos el día de mañana. Tenemos a Daniel Marcos. Con este evento cerramos el año, el día de mañana, de Grow Institute, quien nos acompañará para compartir cómo el 2021 puede ser un año de impulso, de crecimiento, de darle la vuelta a nuestro negocio. Muchas gracias a todos nuevamente, and Tal, thank you again, and Arlen, for make this event possible. Hugs, and thank you very much. Muchas gracias a todos. Un abrazo.
Gracias, Genaro. Thank you so much, Tal.
Thank you, Arlen. Thank you, Genaro. Thank you, everyone.
Gracias, equipo. Bye.